Skills. Show? Show us your agent skills. What are people at the top of the game building with AI agents, and how are they doing it? Are they Claudemaxxing with 8 terminals open at once, or adversarially testing Opus 4.7 generated code with Codex? Do they define suites and swarms of subagents, or use agents, markdown, and agent skills? We are on a mission to find out. All right, welcome everybody to Mid-July's Show Us Your Agent Skills. I'm here with Han and Greg. What is up, guys?
Hey.
Hey, Hugo, how are you?
I'm so well. Great to have you both here, and really excited to see what you're up to with agents today. Also, just love to welcome everyone who's tuning in on YouTube or watching afterwards. Join our Discord, links in the comments, and ask any questions there, just so we can continue the conversation afterwards. And the obligatory hit like and subscribe, share with a friend, check out other things we're up to in the description in YouTube. We've got workshops coming up. We have some live streams with Sebastian Rajka, Chip Huen, and Hamel Hussein as well, people we all know and love. But that is enough on what we're up to here. Greg, you're going to show us what you're up to with agents first. So I might just introduce you and maybe get it somewhat right. But Greg is co-founder and CPO of SpecStory. His work focuses on how teams communicate intent to coding agents, and within teams preserving the reasoning behind their work and verifying what agents produce. Before SpecStory, Greg was CPO at Pluralsight, has worked at GitHub, Dropbox, Google, and Greg was part of the group of people who really AI pilled me initially. Greg was at the forefront of diving super deep into how wild and wacky the world of AI and agents can be, right, Greg?
Yeah, I think we talked back in April of last year, and I remember that was the distinction you made between the difference between building LLM products and building with LLMs, right? We talked about all that, and I think that day we were vibe coding before it was really even called vibe coding. The JFK files had released, and we built some
exactly a viewer for them.
Yeah, viewer on top of them. Yeah,
that was.
It's amazing how much.
It is wild. And to your point, now we have terms like AI engineering and agentic engineering, where I try to help people understand, if you're building with LLMs, building agentic search systems or whatever it may be, you're doing AI engineering. If you're using AI assisted software development, that's agentic engineering. But of course, once you separate them, you kind of need to merge them again, because anyone doing AI engineering is using agentic systems to help them build. And when you're doing serious agentic engineering, you are actually really building your own harness at the same time on top of whatever harness you have through skills, workflows, agent markdown, cron jobs, hooks, whatever it may be, right?
That's right. I've gone so far, I wasn't actually thinking about sharing this, but maybe depending on time. I've gone so far as building a harness around harnesses. It gets really meta.
This really does. We are quote unquote building for the bicycle for the mind, but using the bicycle of the mind to do that. Han, how are you, man?
Good. It's sunny out there in California, so life is good.
Fantastic. So we're actually going to have Greg up first to show us what he's up to with agents, in particular for skills he's working on at SpecStory. But please feel free. This is intended as just a group discussion about what everyone's up to. Greg did send me a demo video of how he likes to work beforehand, which I'd like to show. Can you see my screen, everyone?
I definitely didn't send this video, but
this is definitely Greg's video that he's clearly sent me of how he works with agents. Look at him go, collecting all those markdowns, all those YAML front loaded. He's got combining them all. Look at that now. Big thumb up, Greg, for the win there. And Greg, I think what you tried to tell me you were doing there was going and collecting all variety of information about what the builders who are building are actually doing in their projects. So we make sure that's preserved. We don't want to preserve whole conversations or threads necessarily, although that can be useful. But we don't actually only want to preserve the artifacts of what's built. We want to preserve why it's built, right? So intent is actually a first order principle here.
It is. But I would say storing transcripts, storing your traces, whatever you want to call them, your agent sessions, is really important because to do useful things, like if you were going to try and extract, decisions or the why, you kind of need that raw material. I also think, and this is a very good tee up for myself because it's the premise of what I wanted to share. It just so happens if you think about your day, right? If you're managing many, many agent sessions, maybe in parallel across multiple projects, a lot of the like patterns and heuristics that you use are actually in those agent session logs. And so the sort of premise of what I'm going to share is how you can mine them with a skill that makes new skills, all from your agent transcripts.
Amazing. So what I'm hearing is stuff that I do that I may not necessarily be super, like patterns that emerge in my workflows. This helps to extract them and encode them in natural language so we can include them in future context to help me and agents work better together.
Yeah, I mean, as the like simplest example, if let's say you use an agent to run a bunch of Git commands or something, right? You've probably done that like umpteen times, like 20,000 times at this point, right? There might be patterns latent or like obvious around when you do that. So for example, for me, I have like a preference around, I'll do a big batch of work, accumulate and like a lot of local commits, but I don't want the agent to push it. This is like a super simple example. And I found myself sort of repeating that pattern of telling the agent what to do. And of course, you could like go in and encode that in like a like Claude.md or AGENTS.md, but there's probably many more patterns and preferences, things that you do in terms of how you verify work that the agents are doing that's just like in your transcript. And so what this skill that's called lore does is look at all of that fantastic exhaust, and then it has an engine, part deterministic and part based on your sort of local model, to pull out those patterns and then like provide you with an opportunity to codify them into skills that will then get installed into your .skills directory.
Awesome. And I don't want to answer this yet, but I want to just foreshadow people. Greg thinks a lot and works a lot about how people collaborate with agents as well and can work together effectively on teams. And I presume this plays into how we could work together with similar workflows. But before we jump in, Greg, two questions we ask every guest. First is, what do you love most about working with agents?
I mean, I think that like obvious thing is just how productive you can be. Like that's the obvious thing. So I do love the fact that I don't really have to think about programming languages and sort of like syntax anymore, and I can just express, my sort of desires well thought out, architected in English language and get outcomes and output, which is especially important if you're trying to like build stuff that people might want to use because the whole goal is to get that out in the world and get feedback and iterate and not to sort of like myopically think about like how you can make something that would have taken you months if not years before. So
totally.
productivity.
Did you say get feedback or get feedback? I'm not sorry. The other thing that came to mind then was, and we've been talking about Git already, and of course you worked at GitHub, but the ability of agents to do most of the Git stuff for me, 98% of the time. The other 1 in 50, I end up in some sort of like rebase nightmare. But the ability for it to make sensible commit messages, and also to help people I work with understand what my pull requests are, working with agents that way as well.
Oh, see, that's your problem. You still use pull requests. I wouldn't even do that anymore. just push it straight to a trunk, have your agent summarize it. It works only if you're on a sort of small high trust team. But sorry, that was a digression.
I definitely want to get there. The other question is the kind of a flip side of it in some ways. What do you find most frustrating about working with agents?
Okay, well, one, the isolation, right? It's easy to get sort of entranced in your sessions. But I think the thing, it's frustrating in a more meta sense. I think the like dopamine reward that comes, like that's the counter to the productivity sort of like gain, is actually really annoying. Meaning it's very easy to get sort of lost in. I think there was this like podcast where like Mark Andreessen talked about becoming an AI vampire. I don't like the sort of like attention addiction that comes with working with agents. So I would say that's my biggest frustration is these things are so powerful and so good that it's hard to sort of put them down.
Totally. And I do, when you were talking about productivity, clearly we can be more productive with agents, but there is a productivity fallacy or something, particularly with respect to the dopamine hit. So I can get my agent to build another Kanban board and it feels good, but is it moving the needle for me in any other way? It feels up and to the right in some way, but it definitely isn't all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's jump in. Let's look at Laura, man.
All right. So I have like a small set of slides just to kind of like
great.
help ground some diagrams really. And I'm not even going to show all of them. So I'm going to share those first really briefly. I actually am not going to share all of the slides. So I made this little HTML slide thing. I'm going to go here. Here, I'll go back. So this is just to reiterate what I sort of said at the front end of this
and could you
conversation.
full screen your slides as well?
Yeah, I think it has that ability. It does. Look at
Yeah.
that. Okay. So, okay, you're working with agents, right? Whether it's Claude Code, Codex, Cursor, Gemini, I don't know. That's just because SpecStory supports it. I don't think anyone uses the Gemini CLI anymore. So you're working with agents all day, every day, right? You just are doing your work. And then what happens is, if you use SpecStory, which is like the VS Code plus terminal CLI program that we've produced, it's all open source. It makes it really easy to get all of those session logs into one common format and Markdown into your project repo, right? So you get those transcripts and you download them. Where lore comes in is right after that. So there's a skill, and I'll show the GitHub repo in a moment, that you can install. And whenever you run it, it produces a little lore DB that parses all of your sessions because you know how large those sessions can get in terms of tokens. I mean, they're massive. And it labels all of your conversation turns, right? So basically, it's trying to detect like if a thing that you did was something that you accepted or rejected, and it adds a little bit of metadata to it. And that's important because then it uses that whenever it does the mining and corroboration of patterns from your chat transcripts. So that's what I want to start with, but I'm much more of a fan of demos. So there's more slides here, but just to understand this flow, like what's required to get this working, I'm going to pivot to an IDE, and then I'm going to show you this in action. It's way more fun to work with. Okay, so let me get out of this. Then I'll bring up this. That's not what I wanted to show. Okay, so I already have it installed. And while this is loading, I'll just show you. If you go to our GitHub repo, it's git SpecStory AI. You can go here, and this is where you get the actual skill. And so you can install it with npx skills, add, the skill lore. So I've already done that, obviously. Coming back here, it's actually very interactive, this skill. So once you have it installed, and you can use it in Codex or, Cursor CLI or wherever, you fancy, you can use it in Cursor IDE. I can just like write help. I'll do this. Great. An API error. Awesome. All right. I might have to move to a different model. Is Claude down? That's really fun. Let's try again. Okay, cool.
The demo gods occasionally spiteful.
Oh, look, it's doing it. Okay, great.
Great. And can I just mention that you're still using an IDE, which is nice to see.
I only use the IDE to manage all of my terminal sessions. And also, who can forget the wonderful integration with Git over here? I do love this sort of like GUI view, but
Mm.
that's really the only reason, primarily. Um, but yeah, so okay, I just wrote help, right? And you can see all of the different sort of commands that you can just like give this skill. And so in this case, before I actually rerun it, because it actually takes a little long, I've already synced all of my sort of sessions for this project into this directory. So what that means, if you're not familiar with SpecStory, it'll just write like all of the session logs from all of like what you've done across all your agents into Markdown for you. Remember, this is like the prime matter. This is like what you need for this skill to work. So that's all in here, and it can be. This happens to be a shared repo. This is actually for our cloud product. This is like the repo for our cloud product. This has like not just my histories, but histories from my teammates too. Okay, so push that aside. Now, what I'm going to show you here is like what skills do I have first? And this is going to actually tell me like what have I made with lore, and then also what are all the other skills that are installed like on my machine, which is nice just to understand so that whenever we generate some more, hopefully we can do that and it actually finishes because it sometimes it takes a little long. um, you kind of understand what's there, right? How many times, Hugo or Yuhan, have you installed a skill, completely forgotten about it, and be like, wait, why is the LM doing this thing? Whenever I've just
Mm.
written some English language, right? Because that's how skills work. They like look for, like in your prompt, something to trigger them. Um, so this thing gives you a little bit of output. You can see I actually have some forge skills from lore that I use, whenever they get triggered all the time, and you can understand kind of like a high level view, um, like what they do. Of course, I could go look at the skills, but this is just like a way to get the inventory. And then I have all these other skills that I've installed through different means over time. I tend to be pretty choosy about the skills that I install, but you see, I have at least, I don't know, 30 or so.
I also love that you have Impeccable, which we've seen several times on this series already. Eleanor Berger actually gave a really nice demo of how she uses it with her Hermes agent. And for those who haven't checked out Impeccable, it really helps you with design stuff, and it engages you in Socratic dialogue as well, which is one of the most important aspects of working with agents. It'll ask you what you're trying to do, what your goals are, and several other things to help understand, and then it will get to work.
Yeah, it's great. I just pulled this up for you. I use it all the time, obviously for front end stuff, but also like for presentations and things like that. Like anything that's HTML, it's amazing at.
Mm.
Um, okay, back here. So I'm just going to do the guided setup, and we'll like go through the process. And if this is really slow, I'll choose a different model.
And I've
Um,
shared the links to your GitHub and SpecStory on Discord as well. People can Google it, but anyone there can check it out.
Yeah. So the skill actually tells Claude how to like interact with you. So you get this guided setup using some of the built-ins in terms of like this menu picker and whatnot that Claude natively supports. Um, Other harnesses similar. So okay, I want to mine the skills for this project. I haven't actually done that yet. So I'm going to do this. And then let's just do last 30 days so that maybe it will complete because it takes a little while. And then yeah, I'm gonna find and forge skills. Let's just do that. And then an API error. Cool. Claude was having some problems today. Oh, there it's going. Earlier this afternoon, I saw Claude status was very red.
Mm.
So
It's Kimi launch day.
yeah, it was Kimmy 3 launch day today. Um, so you can kind of read this, but like what's happening, there's actually two parts to this. So there's a deterministic part, and then there's a non-deterministic part. The reason there's a deterministic part is one to support like multiple idempotent runs on the same directory, right? And the second part of that is it is actually looking at these 516 sessions that is probably, I don't know, some very large number of tokens. Some of these like files are very long, right? So like some of these are, this is like all this, there's all this like security stuff that gets triggered with this sort of pre-prompt hook. But like some of these, you can see how long these are. So if you were actually trying to like actually push this all to an LLM, it would not be very happy and it would consume all of your usage very quickly. So the first part, deterministic mining process, it indexes all the skills and then it actually pulls out patterns. That's just like the first step. So this is gonna like work for a while because what it has to do is actually parse every single one of your user agent turns and then convert them into beats. Beats was just a word that was different than an exchange that I chose to say it's the user prompt, the agent response, the user prompt. That's a beat instead of just a user prompt agent response. Because what it tries to do is see, like, did you actually like accept, what came out of the response from your prior prompt and label it. Once it does that, it actually will start to invoke a workflow. So, for example, if you're using like an Anthropic like sort of model harness, if you're familiar with like the dynamic workflows, see, it actually spawned it there. It's oh god. Okay, so there's all this stuff like running in the background. So at this point, we're just gonna have to like wait because it's actually doing a theme sweep and like deep mining everything that it found. And then it's gonna present a bunch of like candidate skills. I have no idea how long this will take, so let's pray that it
Yeah, and
finishes.
you just mentioned Claude Dynamic Workflows, which are super cool. And funnily, Skylar Payne came on recently and showed us how he's built his own version of that. Once again with his Hermes agent, but it allows his workflow essentially allows his agent to just whenever it needs something that he can provide, come in and say, "Hey, I need this now," and he actually has certain deterministic parts of the workflow to make sure he can provide input at certain points in these dynamic workflows.
Yeah, so this is just like running in the background. You can see it's working. I think one of the things that maybe we can do while this is working.
I can you just tell us a bit more about your stack as well? So we're in Cursor now. You don't use IDEs so much. Do you use command line tools or do you use like desktop? Because I'm loving Codex Desktop at the moment, actually.
I have all those installed. Like you can see my dock down here. Um, I've used them,
Yeah, it's
but I
stressing me
don't
out.
use them regularly. It's actually funny. I was talking to my co-founder Jake this morning about this. Um, so I tried to use CMUX, but the thing I didn't like about CMUX, if you're familiar with it, it's sort of like a terminal multiplexer, was that like to get the Git information, I had to install, I think this is like lazy Git or something. And I was like, I don't, I just like I like the GUI version in VS Code, whether it's Cursor or, Copilot, like whatever version of VS Code you're using. And so I was like, I couldn't get around that. I do like the idea of not having to tab between like window instances. So that's
Mm.
the thing that like I don't like about like using an IDE is because I'm using it to basically manage a bunch of terminal sessions and then like off case that you want to like look at, I don't know, like a code file or like a markdown doc. It's nice to have that editor there. It's all there. So it didn't have that. So I kind of said, no, okay, I'm gonna go back to my old habits here. I think the thing that I don't like about like the Codex app like this is I was like looking at this because I had used it, like, I have used it. It's like it's basically just VS Code, but it presents you a different entry point, right?
Hmm.
Because if you start to like look at this thing, um, everything that you can do in VS Code outside of editing files directly, you could do in this. And so like this doesn't really help me that much anyway either. The only nice thing is it has like all your projects, kind of like on the side here.
It
That's
could
like
do
the
that.
only difference.
Yeah, it could do that better as well. It shows me, I mean, it can display all types of artifacts that I want it to there.
It can.
And like when it's doing browser automation for me, I have good visibility into that. Also, I think, and you can get this from the client, but the steering is getting really nice, like the ergonomics, and then the ability to go from here to mobile really easily when using Codex Desktop. Maybe that works in with the client as well. I also just yeah, please go on.
I was
Oh,
gonna say, you said
yeah.
go to mobile. That's another thing. back to the thing that frustrates me. It's like I'm so addicted to these agents. Like I never want to use it on my phone. So that for me, that's
Oh,
not something
dude,
I'm missing. I actually
I'm
like the fact that like I've set up my sort of stack in a way that like I know if I close my laptop, I'm not going to be looking on my phone because I don't use whatever the like Claude version is, like teleport or whatever.
mm,
I don't want to do it on my phone. But keep going.
I do just want to show you both. This is something I saw the other day. Can you see this? This was a book wheel, a mechanical device that allowed scholars to read and compare multiple open texts simultaneously. And I feel like that's what we're doing, like with all the tools to try and have all our, Claude Code sessions open at the same time or whatever it may be. And there's Composer and a variety of other super interesting things. But I think that's essentially what you're using Cursor for. I also, one thing we've seen on this series is a lot of people are hand rolling their own artifacts and viewers that they can draw on and type into. Like Isaac, our mutual friend and colleague,
Mhm.
is like, he gets his agent to create editable HTML. The people at Marimo and people who use Marimo notebooks are, having interactive notebooks that allow you to use a slider or whatever it may be to communicate back to your agent. And I do a lot of this type of stuff. And I do think the future of having canvases where we can work with our agents together and multiple ones kind of looking like this. I don't think you put the agent on a plate like this, which was my first joke, is that you stand back and work on multiple canvases with an agent together. And a lot of us are hand rolling stuff like that at the moment.
Indeed. Is my screen no,
No,
mine
it
is
isn't.
not.
I kicked you off by doing it. So let's jump back into yours and
We're
see.
making progress. We
And
got
what
through.
agents, what harnesses do you like? What models do you dig? What's your stack?
I'm pretty much like Claude Code and Codex. So interchangeably, like I'll use either or, depending on like what I'm doing. Or like, I'm a subscription aficionado. So like obviously I have subscriptions to like all the Max or Pro plans. So I ping pong between Codex and Claude Code
And
primarily.
this week, are you using a lot of Fable and like Soul 5.6 in like super thinking mode, or like what's the vibe?
Yes, so that's I should have probably changed the model like for this lore run. It's using Fable right now,
Oh,
which is
dude.
probably another
Yeah.
reason why it's like a little slow. But I think it's about to spit something out because it finished the
Also, though,
workflow.
Fable's actually quite, if you tell Fable to decide when to use faster subagents and whatever it may be, it's pretty good at that. So I'm playing around with that quite a bit at the moment. 5.6 doesn't seem as great at that, but
Yeah, the one benefit of Fable for what we're doing right now is you actually want to have a lot of reasoning and you want to use the workflow
yeah.
because you're trying to pull out like all these like latent themes and like what you've done. And so you don't need to do these lore runs like that often. Like I would say like once a month or something to see what comes out. Like it's nice to use a really like extra high reasoning model. So you get something that might actually be something you want to install. When I was building it, um, I was testing it on like the code base for this like interactive web RTC collaboration environment that we've also built, which is not really like core SpecStory, save, sync, share your chats, but it was a lot of sessions, like I don't know, 1600 or something at least. Um, I tend to also like use the same session for a very long time since compaction has gotten so much better. And that was like a massive run. And I only shipped lore once I actually was like, I want to actually install one of these skills that it's produced. Because,
Yeah.
there's a lot of cruft, but so yeah, okay. All right. We're almost there.
And just
It's
while we're waiting
going.
as well, you mentioned compaction's gotten so much better, and it's so true, particularly um, codex compaction. I find it at the moment far superior to what I can get with Claude, but Claude has a context window that's way too long for what you would even, after like 150,000 tokens, it craps out of me completely. But I do want to say, like, previously, I was being far more mindful of ending conversations myself, restarting them, having to-do lists with things checked off, whatever it may be. I still do that to token min occasionally, but you really don't need to in order to get the model to not be, the harness to not be stupid now. Compaction has really gotten so much better.
Okay. I can't believe this actually worked, like on this live demo. So in time, at least. So what
Can you
happens
zoom in a
now?
bit as well?
Yeah, I'll try to. Let me move this zoom control a little bit. Uh, oh, it's gonna see the problem though is it's gonna like mutate this. I might,
Yeah, that's fine. That's good.
like when you change your window size, it kind of
Yeah,
like
yeah.
messes with the font of the terminal. Um, so what's happened now is um the sort of like corroboration engine worked. It did all this like latent theme analysis. It did some adjudication to kind of understand if that pattern was one worth presenting. And then what it does is it writes like dossiers, right? And so the reason this has so many more sessions here than like what's actually in this particular project is because it I've run it on other projects, and so all the other saved sessions from those runs are in here, and then it like corroborates across the full corpus. So like I'm working on SpecStory Cloud here. The other product I mentioned, Stoa, is a separate project. We have CLI, we have VS Code extension. So there's all this history. Now, these new skills are sort of relevant to this particular project. So you can see that it mined something about Supabase PSQL surgery. And this is like a very specific skill that's probably not something I would actually want to install, but it's a pattern that's come out of, the transcripts at mine. So let's just go down. I don't like that one. But it is a very involved one. So this define problem before implementing is another skill, and you see that this one's like a latent practice where it's seen this before. See, it says evidence unchanged, and it's presenting it to me again because it's something that like I often do, or at least within the transcripts that are being mined, it's a pattern that's being picked out, right? And so you'll see that the skill and in this engine will actually present you kind of the citations of where in your history files it found this pattern for you. Um, and so it could be that this is something I want to do now, and I might just pick it so we can see how it installs a skill. Report bugs with the artifact, bring the falsifying observation, and I don't know. This is a hygiene gate afterwards. Oh, actually, this might be good. So you can see what it's saying about me in terms of like what I do, like often to sort of call back to the front end of this conversation, right? Like functional success never closes the loop. Immediately after confirming a feature works or before letting anything ship, the user, me, runs a distinct second gate of non-functional checks. Now, lint, staging build, type check, re-render artifacts, refresh audits, full build, test push. This sequence is consistent, behavior first, and this separate sweep for quality regressions. Now, that could be something that like you have built in your CI, right? Obviously. But it's also something that depending on the type of app you're building or what you're shipping, you might also be just doing or having your agent do over and over again, like before you push, right? Because you don't want to push something that you just know is going to break in CI. So that is something that I do like all the time. Um, let's like just pick this one just so we can move forward. So then it skips a bunch of stuff that it couldn't adversarially adjudicate as being like relevant or important enough because it hadn't found it in enough evidence. So there's a lot of text on the page here, I realize. Um, okay, so I could like approve everything, or I can just say like forge this. So it prompted me in plan mode, and well, if the API errors stop, we'll see if it will forge that and install it. And that's like the whole flow. So assuming this actually installs the thing, you've seen it sort of soup to nuts. You get all your SpecStory histories, you run lore, just press enter, you walk through this guided workflow, it presents stuff for your review. It will never install anything unless you actually approve it. You can also like not approve things. Dossiers above one. Okay, sweet. So this is the one it's going to do. Okay, yes. And then you can also uninstall things too. You could say like uninstall X and it will go do that.
Super cool. And one thing that I'm getting out of this is, we have masses of conversations and workflows, and it's trying to extract signal and patterns from them. And one thing I really appreciate about it is you said this is a lot of words, but it's far less words than you usually get. And I can see there's work being done to de-slopify the responses and also to make it as concise as possible. Because the amount you just showed us, if you naively asked an LLM or an agent to do something like this, it would give you pages and pages.
Yeah, that's the nice thing. Like, if anyone's interested, like on the live stream or just after the fact, if you happen to like watch the recording of this, if you go into the lore source code, which I'm sure Hugo will like present, one of the cool patterns is again this like deterministic engine, and using that as well as a lot of like skill foo to make it such that the presentation of the results are something that you can actually comprehend. Like you'll notice like some of the menus and stuff that you're presented with. Like I tried to put a lot of effort into making it such that it was easy to parse because you're right, Hugo. Like, if you're just using vanilla Claude code or Codex all day, it the amount of information and the way it's presented to you, it becomes like very hard to parse after
Yeah,
you've looked at,
and the
the
amount
end
of
stuff.
throat clearing and scaffolding. So there's an absolute lack of things like the point I'm making is concrete, and that was the only load-bearing hypothesis and stuff like that. Like there's
Yeah.
none of that there, right? And you need to prompt that stuff away horribly.
Yep. So this is the skill that it produced. Again, I'm kind of looking, I wasn't looking this with the most critical lens. But yeah, so it produced this. I don't know if this is actually something that I want. And so in that case, you can obviously just delete it here, but I think let me remember the command, like I think you can just like say like uninstall. Let's just get this name and see if it will do it appropriately. And the nice thing about this too is when it installs it, it like installs it across all your agents too.
Hmm.
Uh, so it symlinks for the holdout Claude.md, right? Because that's different than like every single other harness,
Don't get me started.
and it will remove it from all the other directories that it installs it for.
This is super
Wow.
cool, Greg.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming and showing us your eminently useful skills that I'm gonna test out. Um,
Yeah.
Afterwards. And I do, if we have time a bit later, I'd love to hear more about building harnesses on top of harnesses, which is something near and dear to my heart. But without further ado, I'm excited to introduce Han-Lee. And just to remind everyone, if you're watching and have any questions, let us know in Discord. We're here to answer and help as well. We've got two wonderful builders who've been building in the space for decades now. And we're all learning about agents together. So Han-Chung-Lee is Director of Machine Learning at Moody's, where he leads teams building custom LLMs, Gen AI applications, search and discovery systems for financial data. Previously led data science work at Wallet Hub, held engineering roles at Workhuman, AMD, Ericsson, writes about machine learning, engineering, evaluation, and is the author of Evaluation and Alignment, the Seminal Papers. So really excited to have you here today, Han. Is there anything you'd add to your bio or anything I've left out?
Thank you for having me. Yeah, yeah. I mean, if people are interested, I also ran my own quant fund before, managed some tech mutual funds. For that spent about a decade in my life. And now I am returning to the dark side and writing code using black screens, everything dark mode.
Fantastic. So we have prepared a little video for you as well, of the kind of work you do. So let's check it out. Ah, so that wasn't the final version, sadly, but there was a lot of alignment and red teaming happening there. I'll have to share with you the afterwards, the one where you remained 8-bit throughout.
Yeah, I like the chin line on that video. It definitely made me look a lot better than I do.
Fantastic. Well, I'm glad you feel it's a compliment.
I'm flattered.
Before we jump in, I'd love to know what do you love most about working with agents?
Yeah, I think what I found, right, after a couple of years working with agents, you using the Claude Code, first cursor, and now everything's Claude Code for, I don't know, it seems like forever, right? One of the things I found that it became the control plan for all of my work.
Mm.
That's a for AWS. I rarely visit AWS dashboard, control dashboard. It's usually AWS CLI, remote control this, remote control that. And if I need to look for information on Jira, I never go to Jira. I just ask Claude Code and ask it to pull information from Jira. So all this integration so that the data is now actually in my fingertips instead of me needing to scroll through 200 different tabs to extract and find data for myself. So I think that's the biggest benefit, right? And now I am going through a phase of minimalist, as in I just use bare minimum Claude Code with the default model. I don't want to spend time set up because whatever I set up, it's Codex. And who knows if I think it's co-work, right? Claude has the co-works, OpenAI Codex and ChatGPT merged. Who knows what's going to change next day? And it's a lot of fun playing with the tools, but it's more fun using the tools for me.
Totally. And the unlock you mentioned with respect to connecting it to stuff and having it as the control plane. You of course mentioned Jira and AWS. I do encourage people to, I'm using Codex at the moment. I connected it to my Google Calendar for the first time. And I work in multiple time zones, right, with people in Europe, the US, and Australia. And like, especially around daylight saving, that's mind-breaking stuff. I mean, I joke that time zones, the hardest thing in computer science. But the ability for Codex to, I'm like, can you tell me when it is in Berlin at this time and send a calendar invite and invite these people, add the Zoom link? It does it immediately. On top of that, connecting it to your Gmail, for example, and being like, oh, what did Greg say yesterday in an email about X? And it will just pull Greg's email. So I don't need to go through searching through email, which is absolutely, in terms of reducing friction in my life, it does feel more like having an executive assistant now as well, which is wild.
Yeah, it is. But one big caveat is please do not have please only have very limited permission for your AWS or your
Yeah.
infrastructure CLI because that's my biggest fear, right? I don't know what Claude is doing because nowadays it's usually I only use auto mode.
Yep.
Previously, I only use dangerously skip permissions
Yeah.
because I mean, if you ask me for permissions, it's always going to be a tap, 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 always approve. You don't read, and it's just always approve, right? But please don't use. So one of the caveats: do not have over permission keys on your local drive. That spooked me out because I don't want to print out some of my services just because Codex or Opus decided it's necessary to fix.
Without a doubt. So what's one of the things you find most frustrating about working with agents?
One of the biggest frustration is the steerability of agents. It's not the so it works fine, but once you accumulated enough context and you want to steer it the other way, it's not very steerable, especially for writing or for research type of task, or even sometimes triaging some of the informations. And and it's usually a dilemma at that point where like agent doesn't exactly do what I want. And I already have too much context saved in there to just delete and to just restart another session. And mining the actual useful information out of the context is also challenging. So I mean I found like for compaction, right? Greg was talking about compaction is getting better. Uh, I find it that usually my issue happens before compaction gets better, right? The issue is the steerability, the change of information, change of flow during one single session. I think
I,
that's still very challenging for me.
I would love the idea of Oh, just imagine, have you thought about this, Greg? Some sort of context monitor in, I'm just because I use Codex desktop all the time at the moment. It'd be
Right.
so great to have a context management dashboard where I can actually, see what's in context
Right.
currently
I-
and actively edit it
yeah.
and manage it.
Yeah,
Yes,
but like,
yes,
would
and
you like how would you do that? How would you like actively edit everything in the context window of a session?
I'd
well,
use
it, we
another
we
agent with a different context actually, and I'd
ah,
I'd have it visualized probably as like a mind map of some sort with like topics and drop downs that then I could kind of dive into quite quickly. I think the
Yeah,
ergonomics is a good question.
yeah.
it's a lot of times it's I sometimes so for Claude Code on CLI it's not probable, right? But on Codex or Cowork, you can go up a few conversation before it goes into the deep end and start forking that conversation from that point. That is still like that part is super useful. But that does require manual control. So now instead of tapping through or using tmux, I have to like keep track of 50 codex conversations, which is sometimes fun and not fun.
Hmm. But I totally agree that once you get to a certain context, like you have overloaded it already, and it's really challenging to turn the wheel. So what do you want to show us today, Han?
Sure. So I've been working on with a few collaborators with this things called SkillsBench. So I mean everybody can write code on skills, right? And but the efficacy of those skills is usually in question, right? And sometimes there's going to be overlaps, and sometimes some skills are useful, but not quite there yet. And sometimes some skills, if we treat skills like programs, some skills do not fail gracefully. And it will end up having a bunch of hallucinated results at the end if it doesn't fail gracefully and you use all its internal knowledge to complete the task or to hallucinate the task away.
Mm.
So I work on that. Let me share my window if you don't mind.
Yeah, please
So
do. And
so
is it skillsbench.ai?
skillsbench.ai, yes.
Great. I've linked to
It's
that in the Discord as
skillsbench.ai.
well. Check it out, everyone.
So allow, let me share this desktop. Sure. All right. So skillsbench, right? So we define agents, right? So we define agents as having a harness plus a model, right? Because the model you need hands and feet to connect it to different tools and whatnot. So what we found is we created this benchmark called SkillsBench that measures the efficacy or the effectiveness of different agents and different model and harness combinations. So you can see that we create this with Frontier in mind. The score is going to be biased to very low, right? So GPT-5 with open hands actually outperforms Codex by a bit, right? And the same skill by different model and harness combination
Mhm.
together could perform very, very differently. So this is one of the things that people don't talk enough about, but coming from a data science or machine learning background, is like, all right, yes, there's a new model. Yes, you can always just swap in the new model. The model is always going to work. The model is always going to spit out something. But
Well,
the
also,
effective, Mhm.
I was just going to say, interestingly, I mean, Greg mentioned earlier that Claude and other harnesses and products have different specs. So you need your Claude skills and your general agent skills and agents markdown, Claude markdown. Oftentimes, Claude, depending on the model, won't even recognize the skill when I express it in natural language. So I default now to using slash commands to access skills in Claude code, whereas I don't need to with every other harness.
Oh yes. And the slash command is also awesome because when you write a slash command in some form of markdown file, you can also use that slash command as part of the callback, right? So so Greg and you were just talking about like, all right, before I do a pull request, I have to sanitize or do a sanity check of my input, make sure it's not overly verbose, right? We always see Claude Code, they love adding tons of comments between in between the code, right? If it's YAML file, the comment is going to be like 20 pages long for
Totally.
a 5-line YAML, right? So that they love comments because that's their thinking traces. So that's the slash comments are also like pretty good for if you're managing a project that you're sharing with others. So this is SkillBench, and how we run it, I use a tool called BenchFlow, which is basically an orchestrator. So orchestrator, a control plan of how things work. So let me find. Sorry, I'm just going to. All right. So let's do this demo. So how we do it is we manage it as a task. Right. So in this scenario, because we're talking about agents, which is more of a reinforcement learning type of framing. So every input or every input prompt is a task. So we can formulate so this is a sample task, and we can go in here. The task definition is here. So there's a certain schema. We're using BenchFlow, making it easy, and it's a quick demo that we conjured. There's skills, XL, different tags, blah blah blah. So this is like, okay, all right, build a quarterly sales report workbook from CSV in this category, and you have this skills available, blah blah blah, right? So everything is set up inside an environment because an agent works in reinforcement learning setting. An agent interact with an environment to produce a result. So the environment in this case is a Docker file, which is basically, all right, we have this set up. We copy in the skills, right? Because skills are living in the local directories, right? So if you have Claude Code, the skills is either living in your project directory or living in your .claude/skills or somewhere there, right? So this is how everything gets set up, and we can run it. So I'm just going to use Claude Code because this is my orchestration engine, right? So while we run, we can talk a little bit about how we are thinking, right, in terms of evaluation these skills or how we are evaluating agents. So for agents, like if we look at the actual traces, typically you see an input and you will go through some reasoning, tool use, reasoning, tool use, result, tool use, result, tool use, result, blah, 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 until it finishes, right? And in that sense, in this type of scenario, there is, like in the old days of ChatGPT, it's usually, okay, you have an input, you have the output. You look at the input and the output, and you evaluate them as a pair, right? So the surface is quite limited, but nowadays the evaluation surface just grows so big in the agent world, right? Because you not only have the output, but you have the traces as what the agent actually do to complete its task. The trace you can evaluate. You can evaluate memories, right? If the agent is writing down some markdown file, adjusting the skills.md live or not live, if it went into sleeping mode and tried to rewrite the memory, like rewrite the memory.md or whatever MD, soul.md, if it's, I guess OpenClaw, if people are still using that, right? And then there's the environment, like did the agent change some databases? Did the agent add or delete a file? Blah, 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 right? And then one of the more maybe esoteric, maybe not so esoteric now, is the mechanistic interpretability of it. Can you monitor the agent's thought process, right? I guess nowadays it's called JSpace for due to the paper that Anthropic just published. Like you can take some of the hidden layers in and make a model out of it for interpretability basis, right? So the evaluation surface just grows so big, right? So the way we evaluate becomes quite different. Where now let's see if it does anything. Or it's running. Sometimes it takes a while. But here is a prior run. So after each run, it will produce certain artifact, right? So there's JSON-L for results, ADP. So these are the agent trajectories. So before that, because we need a way to evaluate the agent. So we need to have test, which means we set up a very interesting candidate, very short evaluation task to make a verifier of some sort, right? So a deterministic, this could be a LLM as a judge if it needs to be, but typically a deterministic is short one, so we can quickly spot check if the agent is doing the right thing for the final result. So then here, after it's done, we can then, let's say results. Look at this and see the actual full trajectory of what the agent is doing, right? So the input is exactly the same as what is in test.md. Like, hey, build a quarterly sales report, blah, 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 blah. The formatting is it's way off. It's gonna look better on VS Code, but whatever. This is fine. We can survive. And then the first one, it ran into an error. Docker compose command failed for environment, blah, blah, blah. All right, so this is an issue, right? But then it still continue to run. Username, sheet, blah, 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 and then you get a completion, a system prompt, done, the quarterly sales report. So like you can see like, okay, user, assistant, user, and then it start the function calls. Some of what happened during the trajectory are the function calls. You have the function call agent, or it uses a function call agent, which is sub-agent probably, right? You launch a new agent to handle complex multi-step task, like all this. So I'm just going to quickly scroll through different function. It used bash and a cron. It created a cron job for whatever reason, right? So and then you get at the end you get a score out, which is 1-0 or whatever score. But what is important when we are evaluating for the agent stuff, especially for the traces, we have to make sure the agent doesn't go out of bound. As in, if we are not expecting this agent when using this tool to use cron, but it did, then it's something that we have to look out for, right? So sometimes people say it jailbreaked or it reward hacked. Like it could just delete a file from your test suite here using a file delete function to delete a file and make the test pass, right? So those are some of this jailbreaking or alignment or the type of issues that we're looking for. So yeah,
Fascinating. And I am
yes.
interested. One thing I'm seeing in here is that we don't want determinism in everything, but there are certain parts of the workflow which are deal breakers, and it's binary. So we do want to like check for some deterministic processes, right?
Correct. There are some processes has to be deterministic, right? And there's this concept called reinforcement learning from verifiable results, which is all the rage, right? That's how a lot of things get smarter, learn how to reason. When they say verifiable result is can we create or can we find from the eventual correct output enough signals deterministically to give it a grade, says yes or no.
Yeah.
And this is also very helpful when you have the traces where you will be able to, in certain domains, you'll be able to penalize the agent for either thinking too long or spend too much tokens during thinking to achieve the same task.
Can I
Because
ask as well,
nowadays,
what type of skills are appropriate to use this for? Because do you need it to be verifiable, or can we test it on things that require some more form of judgment or taste?
so for taste, you can definitely use this. But then at the end, your script, your verification script will have to be an LLM as a judge.
Yeah. And you'll want to align that in some way with your human
You want to align
preferences.
that with in some case, right? And so this is especially I don't use this for my personal stuff. As I said, I am a minimalist. I I have some skills, but it's nothing like fancy to brag about. I don't spend even that much time working on them. Um, but if you are building services to service your customers or a wider set of audiences, then evaluating them properly to ensure that they are functional is extraordinarily important, right? Same thing with MCP servers as well, right? Because MCP server have different prompt, but to ensure your customer have the right uh, experience or ensure your customer's agent have the right experience, you might want to, let's say, if you have a Gmail server and then you have a Yahoo Mail MCP, Gmail MCP, you have a couple of Mail MCP, you might need to couple them together to see how they conflict or how they cooperate or intervene with each other or how the model gets confused. Right. So like
Yeah.
so the testing surface for this becomes all right, it's not just an MCP server that runs, it's not just a agent skills that runs to the end, but it's actually how the agent would use it successfully. And you have to test it somewhere systematically in a more scientific manner, if for the lack of better words.
Fantastic. So yeah, what's happening here now?
So if the result is done, it fails, score is 0, 1. Okay, so OAuth password, Claude haiku, blah blah blah, fail. All right, so there's some failures, blah blah blah, and then I can also inspect the traces instead of looking directly on JSON. I can so I know I can tab to another tab and just type in the command. It runs probably faster. But nowadays we're all in the habit of uh, prompting Claude Fable to change a file name and spend
Mm,
$10. Right. That's
yeah,
that's the name of the game today. But this takes too long. I'm just gonna copy paste. All right. Let's see. Probably I can run here. Uh, where did the jobs go? Sorry.
it's a question I ask all the time. One thing I love, and this wasn't planned when I invited you both to today, but that a through line here is there's just such a massive information in what LLMs generate, and for very different purposes. But you're both demonstrating how we extract signal in order to get that mass condensed in a fashion that communicates to us what we need to know in order to verify things and build things. Which is pretty cool, huh?
I
Yeah,
noticed the same thing, Hugo.
all right. It's
Really
probably
interesting.
here. All right, so yeah, I guess running a shell command is too hard for me now. I have to rely on the agent. I'm totally lobotomized.
I love it.
I'm dependent on Claude now to do anything. But yeah, so like you can also see the actual prompt on the job that we just run, prompt, and then the thinking traces, right? You have the thinking traces, and then blah blah blah. Use a skill, go through the end and yeah, so that's that. And the trick for some of this is imagine you run this across 100 or 1,000 different tasks, send it
Mm.
to different sandboxes, run it at scale, run it for evaluation, burn all your tokens and all your credits. And that's the fun part, right? Like, how do we incinerate enough tokens faster?
Mate, well, that's the game, right? And I mean, there's the joke that you know we incinerate tokens to generate slop, and then we incinerate more tokens to de-slopify it as well. I also love, and this is something we've seen a bunch and we know is happening now, but we're all so sick of. Look, actually, Matt Rockland on the show a couple of weeks ago, who created Dask, among other things, when I asked him what's the most frustrating, at one point he said just how much I have to read. It's real, like the amount of text is so exhausting. And that really speaks to something we've seen here is like reducing output and extracting the signal. But also you were just showing some HTML, which we've all rediscovered HTML because it helps us work with our agents and we don't have to read Markdown all the time as well. And we can have some nice visuals, right?
Yes, yes, and I think there's something interesting you say about taste, right? Taste is really when you read enough slop, you recognize, all right, this is something that's AI generated, right? So I'm not going to be shy. I'm not going to be shameful. This chart is AI generated, pretty standard. You can tell it's AI generated
Yeah,
because every Claude generated thing they favor some like rounded box, very tan, like very warm color at the background, and slight like you have a top tab that's a title. You can tell only when you consume enough slop.
without a doubt. And there are some really interesting studies that I was messaging with Hamill about actually, because he's on a lot about AI slop in writing at the moment. But there are studies that show like the best AI detectors are people who use AI a lot.
Yes, that's the only way you learn. There's a quote somewhere. It says like we shape our tools and our tools shape us.
Without a
Right.
doubt.
So like
Without a
all
doubt.
this AI writing, you see like if this is not this, it is not it's not it is not blah blah blah. It is right, and then or like you have a lot of staccato sentences where you have a lot of very short punchy sentences concatenated together, or M dashes, or back in 2 years ago it was stealth. And this
Beautiful.
this is a distribution shift too, because this AI slop distribution shift like on a quarterly, yearly basis, where their training distribution shifted or their post-training distribution shifted, which caused the model behavior to shift, and the slop generated shift. So it's not too dissimilar to us humans, right? Whatever that was hot back in the 90s, it's now fashionable again. So there is
Totally.
all this circle of life.
It really is. Hakuna Matata. And Hana's made the load bearing and concrete points.
It's a
Explicit.
substrate. It's a
Exactly.
substrate of a conversation.
Um, Amazing. Is there anything else you not that this isn't enough? I mean, my mind's still, overflowing. Yeah, is there anything else you wanted to chat on or show us?
Yeah, sure. So 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 just in case, right? Just in case people haven't seen enough of. So one of the things I do with my personal work is 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 I use Obsidian for my knowledge, right? So I still have thousands of tabs open, or hundreds of thousands of tab open. And so what I do now, right, one of my workflow is I use Obsidian as my augmented memory. And only the article I read, I will clip them, store them in Obsidian. I don't want to clip something I don't remember. What my biggest challenge for myself is sometimes I remember I read something somewhere, but I couldn't find it. It's what we in search call like tip of the tongue search, where you roughly know the concept, but you don't know the exact term or the keyword to get it out. So I clip all of the articles I read, put them into Obsidian, and on a nightly basis, I am using Codex. You can use Claude Code as well. That's all the same. To sift through all of the documents and get all of the entity names and concept names tagged and linked together. So it's a nightly job, sort of. I guess this is my second brain's sleep time when it does the agglomeration and tagging of the subject.
Awesome.
And
And do you have that set up as a cron job, some sort of pulse, or?
it's a, let me see if I can share my ChatGPT. It's a set scheduled task.
Scheduled
So
task.
yeah,
Amazing.
it's a scheduled task. So basically something like this, right? I have a scheduled task notes. It's in my notes folder, my Obsidian vault. Basically, and let me blow this up so people can see it.
So while Han's doing that, I just want to say, like, scheduling tasks, like deterministic workflows with agentic stuff embedded in them. All of these things are so powerful. So when you're getting agent pilled, just remember there's stuff we've been doing in software for a long time. Hooks, as in triggers, and symlinks for our Claudes and agent stuff, and cron jobs and dynamic workflows using all the agent stuff, which is really
This,
important to know, I think.
yeah, you're absolutely right. This is, sorry, I'm talking to like Claude, but this is amazing because the reason I said this is amazing because if it's 3 years ago, this
Mm.
will have to cost one full engineering team for what you have to have a someone that knows how to do NLP to do entity extraction. You have to find someone who knows NLP to do entity linking, and then there's some machine translation because I clip from both English, simplified Chinese, or traditional Chinese sources, right? Because there's a lot of good research and content coming out of China on AI. So I clip all of them, and I want to also get aliases, right? Between, so I can, if I click on transformers, I can find all of the content that's not only in English but also in Chinese, whatever that I clip from like Weibo or Zhihu or something like that, right? So this job this is just so amazing, right? And yeah, so now I have this running every night. I mean, I can run it sooner, but I don't see any reason why. So this is one of the nice thing that I have, and at the end, let me see. Oh, yeah, you can see some like outputs, like a big fancy globe. I don't know, I mean, it's pretty, but you can go in and you can see. All right, Uber. There I can connect to Uber and or like different, or you can see how different concept group together, right? And of course, because it's entity naming, you will have a lot of uh, name of the company being the big cluster. But like right here, you can see. All right, sorry, I'm gonna point to the top right hand side. I don't think it's very easy, right? All right, so like top right, it says like AI chip. Like every large companies are trying to do AI chip, and Amazon is one of them. And that's the list. There's an article probably from Digitimes or something that talks about who in Taiwan are manufacturing these AI chips. Yeah,
Awesome.
so, so yeah, it's really like it's an amazing way to process information.
I also want to index on the fact that, so firstly, if people haven't explored like LLM wikis, which Karpathy popularized, go and check it out. When doing it, I love Han's approach. I want to say a few things. Firstly, be mindful of what you ingest into it and how to, and decisions you make early on will propagate. So be really mindful of how you're constructing it. Be really active in the process early on. It will set the stage for what happens later as you give your agent more rope. The other thing Han mentioned is he puts things in it that he reads, and I like feel free to do something else, but just know what you're doing. Your agent is getting a lot of context that you don't even know what's in there as well. And it actually reminds me of the early days of iPods when it was the first time I could like get like 20 gigs of music from a friend that I'd never listened to and put it on an iPod and then just listen to. And it's such a different paradigm of interacting with information and media that it's actually can be quite dissociating. So after the iPods first came out, I actually got an iPod mini or whatever it was and just put a few albums on it because that's all I like had the space to really emotionally connect with and all of these things. So we do want to, it's a very exciting time, but when new information technology emerge, we want to be mindful of what we give to them and allow them to inject into our consciousness as well, I think.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I think all these models learn all this, they learn and gain all these capabilities by reading the whole internet, by completing a lot of the task. And we are learning, and we should be learning the same way, just so that we don't completely outsource our understanding or comprehension to the models. Because at some point, if we do that, uh, we will have to pay the debt, and that
Without a
is
doubt.
that is that is pretty heavy.
The hidden cost of technical debt in agent AI psychosis mode.
Yes,
3 a.m. surrounded by Claude code terminals. Um, Dude, this is such interesting work you're up to, and I can't wait to build more skills and workflows using law, and then going and evaluating them with all the different systems I play around with SkillsBench. So if you want to stop sharing your screen, maybe we can just have a bit of a chat. I am interested. Uh, Greg, before we were talking about harnesses on harnesses, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this, Han. But something I try to help people understand is for people who use, I almost hesitate to call them like coding agent assistants now. It's like general purpose computer use agentic assistants or something like that, right? But for people who use those, I try to help them understand that a lab, a frontier lab doesn't just ship a harness and you use it. You're actually constantly, by writing skills, by setting up scheduled tasks, by constructing an agents.md, you're continually building the harness with it. I do a lot of work in agentic data science as well, where Claude is really bad at data science. Well, it's better than you might expect, actually, but it's still pretty dumb about a lot of things. So you build up your data science harness around it. So that is prelude to just thinking through how we're active in building and rebuilding harnesses. Greg?
Yeah. So I'll give a little exposition on what I was intimating before. So you know, after I built this one collaborative product for SpecStory, it's again this sort of think like Zoom meets like collaborative, like Google Docs meets like shareable agents. Um, I had accumulated like again like all those sessions, like thousands of them, and I used a workflow to mine a lot of patterns that I then turned into like a book actually, and then that book became sort of the premise for this course I'm going to deliver, yada yada. But the sort of through line to all of that is, and this actually kind of bleeds into the reason why I made lore in the first place, is that like we repeat ourselves many, 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 many times in these conversations we're having with these agents, whether it be for the purpose of creating code or product, or it's for general research, or like Han, you shared, it's like your control plane for everything, right? When it comes to building product, the thing that I also don't like, and you mentioned this as Han was presenting, is the amount of reading that you have to do. It's just
No.
maybe I'll revise my prior frustration. I also share that sentiment. Like the amount of walls of text that I read a day, pivoting between many different terminals across many projects is like just it's mind-numbing. And I also don't love the fact that no matter how good that these models get, we're spending the vast majority of our time just verifying if it actually did the thing that we intended it to do. And so that led me to say, well, what's the meta around the stuff that I do? Whether it be something that I can consolidate into a skill so I can save myself some time. And the thing that even in today's models like Codex, and Claude have like the slash goal command, right? Which allows for like more unattended runs. We specify criteria like invariance and sort of acceptance checks. Is that's all great. I actually love the goal functionality, but there's not like the model is doing the verifying, right? So if you actually like look at how the goal command works, for example, the model will go in there and it'll have like an adjudication run, and it's going to use the same model family to sort of like test it's better than what it did before. So the premise of this harness I've been building wraps whatever CLI you use, and it can wrap multiple at the same time. The core of it is that it has a gate, a sort of definition of done check that you can define in like a deterministic manner. It actually all does this for you. And then whenever you give a prompt to it, like a goal, or it can be much more robust than like a goal. It can be like a whole orchestrated plan. uh, the harness will keep either Claude Code, Cursor, Codex running until it passes these hidden definition of done checks. So think about like the Ralph Wiggum loop, right? That everyone knows. It was like the precursor to goals, right? There was just like very, very naive. It's like run 20 iterations, right? This is like don't stop running until you actually pass these deterministic checks that, oh, by the way, are in a different place than the model has access to. So the model will not be the one determining its end run. It's called dead reckon. You can go to like deadreckon.sh. There's like a
I
page in
noticed
there.
that in your terminal in some cool ASCII
Yeah.
ring vibe or
Yeah,
something.
I've been working on it for a while, just like my spare time, because it's not fit for purpose for everything. It's like more for like you want to do a very long unattended run and you want to come back and you want to know that basically, if it's been running for 20 hours or something, like that it's past what you've predefined as the thing that's going to allow the harness to break the loop. Because I don't know if you both know this, like what stops, like why do the harnesses stop? Do you know?
So
What do you mean by stop?
Like when you give a prompt, right? You give a prompt to do a thing, right? And then eventually the harness will like stop, right? Like the
Oh,
tool.
yeah. I mean, essentially, it's part of the reasoning, right?
there's two parts. One is for most harnesses, there could be a setting that limits the number of turns, right? So let's say if I run Claude Code in my PR review, I can give it like 10 or 15 turns to make sure it doesn't run forever. And
Yeah,
the
so
other part is
that's one way, yeah.
right, and then the other part is when the model decides it's done, it's done.
It's actually so if you look at the source code of like Codex, which is open source, or go look at Pi, they all share the same behavior. Of course, it depends on the LLM's reasoning, but it's whenever the
Right?
model stops calling tools,
Yeah.
right, that it
When it
finishes.
returns to the
Not because it's,
completion endpoint. And that's what I meant with
yeah,
respect to like that's why we call it
yeah,
React, right? It will reason until it quote unquote thinks it has enough information. But you're right, it's when the input, and to Han's point, there may be like a limit in the number of turns it
there
can
might be
take,
a
but
limit.
it's when the input triggers the output being a completion endpoint and not a tool call.
There,
Yeah,
there is also this phenomenon, like if you try to do a very long horizon task where you ask it to transpile, let's say Postgres into Rust or into Zig, for that matter, right? It will try to do that as long as possible until it's done. So let's go transpile this to blah blah blah, and verify it until it's done. And what would happen is certain models, like some of the older models like Kimi 2.5, which is it's older, but it's like 2 quarters old, it will give up once it cannot achieve once the model realized it couldn't achieve the task. But some models are very eager, as in it will try for as long as probable until if even if fail, it'll keep on trying. So some different model have different personalities. I think that's a training artifact where the models were literally trained for extraordinarily long horizon tasks, so they have the persistence to try. Where some models will fail. It doesn't say it does not say that if or the task did not fail. The model will try until it doesn't feel like it's until it doesn't it will try until it realizes it couldn't complete the task, and you'll output a end of text token says, hey, I'm done.
And
yeah.
you can also, like, in the context, whether that's in the system prompt or Agents.md or your instructions or the skill or whatever, be like, try lots of different things. If the first thing fails, then try and give it examples of the types of things to try, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think with now with dynamic workflow, you can just tell Claude launch as many sub agents as
Yeah.
possible, try different things, and just incinerate your tokens.
Yeah. And I've just linked in the
Yeah.
Discord actually to two lightning lessons I'm teaching soon. They're free lessons on building effective harnesses. First, building the loop and then using SDKs to build effective harnesses. And also one on that I've called loop engineering without the BS, because a lot of people are trying loop engineering for all types of nonsense. I think it can be really powerful when, like, auto research is a wonderful example, and applying that to certain things. Doug Turnbull came on and applied it to, improving agentic search techniques and that type of stuff. When you have a really good objective function, you can hill climb and can figure out how to not overfit. Loop engineering plus plus can be great, but if the objective, sometimes the objective function is for the human to understand something as well, right? In exploratory data analysis. So you don't want to do loop engineering for certain things. So I am giving a lightning lesson on that as well. But I am wondering if are you guys looping much? I don't do that much work which requires being that loopy.
I mean, I think goal, like if you use a lot of goal commands, that's a variation of a loop.
Yeah. And you do
I
that?
Yeah, all the time. Like I actually built the Dead Reckon harness purely with like Codex goals.
Can you
And
give me a
now I'm
few
using it.
examples of what type of goals you'd set and that you found it was effective in meeting?
I mean, they're very long, but I can show you them. Like in
Yeah.
so yeah. Oops. Ah, oh my God, everything just popped up. Okay, so
Shout out to Isaac Flaff in the Discord and to Manus, I saw as well.
okay. So this is the repo for this Dead Reckon harness, right?
Hmm.
And all of the source intent, if you will, is in the goals directory. Um, I got so enamored with goals when they first came out. I created a skill and did like a little write up on what I was calling just like goal engineering. Not that we need any more like goal, loop, context, whatever engineering. But so this was the very first goal that I gave it, and it's built with a skill. And so you can kind of get a sense. The goals in here, but actually all the context is in a writer document. You'll see there's like a goal writer pair for every single one with sort of like a theme. This was before it was even like a release candidate piece of software. But you can see kind of like the format of these goals. They all follow the same format. All the reference context is the important bit. Like so, it'll break down from this high level goal a series of sort of phase tasks to execute, and then it won't break the quote unquote loop until each of these independent verification steps um, are sort of verified, if you will, right?
So
You
this is
see
so
the
important
filter.
because it needs to be, when you have a goal, when you're doing this type of loop engineering, it needs to be verifiable in some sense, right? Computationally. So can you talk us through just one of the verification sections so we can understand a bit more?
Yeah, let's like find like there's a lot. Let's find a later one that I kind of remember. I don't know. We can just go through. Oh, this is when I was building campaign.
While you're doing that, I'll just in the Discord, Septam has written, please explain in the most basic way what loop engineering is. And the way I would explain it is if you've got a way to verify something computationally, whether that's via code checks, artifact checks, LLM as a judge, agentic checks, then you get your agent to just keep doing it until all those checks are met. So hill climbing is an obvious example. So that's why Karpathy's getting an agent to rewrite PyTorch code over and over again in 5 minute whatevers in order to hill climb towards their objective function is an example of this. But Greg, Han, would you correct my definition or phrase it differently?
I think that's right, but there are a little bit of caveats in terms of the reward or the objective definition, right?
Mm.
So a lot of the loop engineering, the trick is how do you define the reward so that the model produce a result or the agent produce a result that you want. Let's say if you just say, hey, slash go Claude, please help my PR pass all the test, then there might be some unintentional effect, as in Claude go out and delete your test cases to make it pass, right? So there are some caveats in terms of the objective design. So if we use Go, one thing we do need to make sure is throughout the trajectory, it doesn't go out of bound to do something that's unintended or crazy. Or
Absolutely. I mean, Goodhart's
in
law applies to like any metric will be hacked in the end, right? And the silly sci-fi example is you tell your AI robots or whatever to create world peace and they kill all humans and they're like, hey, peaceful world now.
it worked. So that's
Yeah.
why in Claude agents, agent.md, you have this like allow tool list, right? Because the model you might not be able to control its behavior completely. So you have the harness acting literally as a harness to constrain the model from doing certain things.
Yep.
So it's only allowed to use read, write, but no delete or something like that.
I'll
Love it.
give a super simple example of how I like to think about loop engineering. Okay, if a agentic coding harness runs an LLM in a loop, the goal of loop engineering then is to run your agentic coding harnesses in a loop. So it's just one step meta up, right? Like, and so, however you do that, however you invoke it is the sort of like premise behind this very buzzwordy sort of phrase right now. I think a couple weeks ago it was like if you were on Twitter, like all you saw was people talk about loop engineering. I think after Pete Steinberger talked about it. It's basically like, look, we have these agents that can do very long horizon things. We don't want to be the catalyst continuing to prompt them manually over and over and over again. So, how do you build, like you both talked about, a set of conditions in an environment to keep the agents running to achieve some, objective?
Yeah,
And
I
that's
love
how
it.
I
And
think of it.
I love it. And to be clear, I mean, one reason Pete Steinberger is able to do this is, he uses like a million bucks in subsidized tokens per month or whatever, right? Look,
Yeah.
Seth has actually pushed into Discord. Can you please try to define what a goal is? And a goal is something you want to achieve. But I think behind the question is, I'd love to hear from both of you some goals that you would set that you think are appropriate for loop engineering and goals that you might have which aren't appropriate for looping that you probably need to be more in the loop for.
Um, So like a goal in the context of like agent coding harnesses right now is has a very specific meaning, and then it also has the general meaning which we've touched on. It's actually a type of command that you can run to get the harness to run in a loop for a unspecified amount of time. Um, and it requires you to write something that is going to have something that can be evaluated, right? Like an exit or stopping condition or an objective function. Um, so I think like the difference is, when a lot of these products first came out, people were trying to figure out like, how can I have the agent stay the course? How can I break down the work? How can I, do like specking, right? Like how can I write a spec that's going to enumerate a list of tasks and like put a lot of effort up front. I think that like mental mindset shift that you should have if you want to, use goals, which is again a way of making the agent sort of operate in a loop, is to not try to specify all of the implementation steps like you might have in the past and let the agent make quote unquote decisions based on the sort of outcome that you're defining, right? And
Mm.
that's like the difference, right? Don't do all the implementation sort of pre-spec'd and planned. Set a set of criteria that the agent can evaluate with the tools it has access to on your machine or in the cloud, and let it go until it's able to, use a sub agent or an adjudicator that it passes your exit criteria. So I had it pulled up. I've closed it because we kind of were off topic, but like one of the pieces of verification as an example is like I was adding the ability um, to my dead reckon harness for it to spawn and run multiple coding agents from heterogeneous providers, right? Because one of the patterns that I've long used, and I mentioned this beginning of the show here, is I'll implement something in Claude, Claude code, right? And then I'll use Codex with like a commit SHA range to say like go do effectively like a code review, for lack of a better term. And so I wanted to have a way of like easily automating that amongst many other things. And so like Dead Reckon can spawn a planning provider using Claude Code, like an implementation provider using Codex or vice versa, and then have your choice of like review agent, for example. And so one of the criteria when I was implementing that functionality was for it to actually test in a real run that it was able to, with an exemplar sort of goal prompt, to build like some arbitrary thing like Flappy Bird. Like it doesn't matter what it is, right? Anything you were wanting to build, that actually worked, right? And so that's not like a traditional test, right? That's like more of like a user behavior functional test. And putting stuff like that into your verification steps of your goal, like actually run the program and verify the output, like down to n depth or whatever. In this case, like, I want you to use Claude code in the harness to, actually implement this thing, having like Codex verify it, and then look at all the logs and prove it. Like, don't stop the implementation until that happened. That's like a difference, I guess, or an example of like what you can do when you're writing goals.
Totally. Han.
Let me put it in using some analogies, good or bad. So let's say, for example, doing dishes. When you have a 5 years old, 7 years old, when you tell them to do dishes, you have to handhold them a little bit, make sure the water is warm, make sure you use dish soap and scrub cleanly both surfaces, blah blah blah, right? And then as they grow older, smarter, you go, please go do dishes using the dishwasher. And if they are 40 years old, hopefully they learn how to do dishes. You just tell them to go dishes, go do dishes. And at the end, you only need to check to see if the dishes are clean and dry, somewhere loaded either in the cabinet or in the dish dryer. So that's the difference, the model progression that we went through over the past 3 years now. Yeah, 3 years, right? Between initially ChatGPT, which is really good at single step actions, to some Claude code where you still need to handhold couple a little bit, and now loop engineering, Ralph Regan or whatnot, right? Auto research, it's all like that. So that's the more analogy approach. If you don't mind me sharing the screen.
Please.
So if we use a more of a machine learning or AI definition, when you have a loop at the end, the key is you have to have a verifier that you can verify the output is correct. And whatever implementation detail, single agent, multi-agent, using scales, using like 200 different agents, or using one agent, that's irrelevant because all of those details can be learned by backpropagation. Now, how do you define a good verifier or a good reward function? That is the trick, and you have to experiment and learn. Let's say, for example, if you want to have the model write a final paper for you, you want to perhaps you need to come up with some verifiers or some checks. Perhaps you don't want staccato dense sentences. Perhaps you don't want to see any em dashes. You can add those in to your verifier so that you make sure the model's output does not include those. Or you need to add, all right, I need to have like 5 paragraphs. Do I have 5 paragraphs? Or maybe there is a word length limitations, or there is a sentence length limitations, or sometimes something more deterministic, like I want to write in the voice of a certain person, or I want to have the diction of a seventh grader or a 10th grader, right? And you want to cover topics A, B, C, D, E. So those are the things that you can set up as your goal. And that's how you can know how this is how you ask model, the goal or loop engineering is literally you have to design what you want as an outcome, express that in a somewhat verifiable way. And if one of the things is missing, then you will really quickly find out that, all right, the model output this, but then I want it to add two more paragraph because it's too short, or it uses so many M dashes. I need to fix that. Or it doesn't pass, I guess, Pengrand, the AI detector, which is, I don't trust it, but people use it, so we have to use it, right? Does it pass 10 Pengrand? If it doesn't, rewrite. Right. So set up some of this things. So for coding, it could be that, all right, you want to pass all the tests, you want to have all the test cases, you want to have, let's say, 100% test coverage. Like all this doesn't really mean it does something, maybe not perfect, and you don't want to have too many comments and all this information. So with that, you have to have some sort of environment or a sandbox to run it on. So very typically, if we run everything on our laptop, right? Or you can run this on a modal box or some sandbox somewhere, or in Claude managed agents, they Anthropic manage the Claude sandbox online for you, so everything is run in the sandbox, so you don't have to mess up your local environment, right? So that's the more data science, machine learning type of approach of explaining what a verifier is, right? So or a goal is. So can you define it? Is the biggest challenge. I'm going to stop sharing.
Without a doubt. And thank you for explaining that and analogizing so clearly as well. Greg, please.
Oh, I actually, your analogy, Han, inspired me to express it in a slightly different analogy that I think everyone will get. So we've all been managed by or managed people before. If you've worked in tech, you've probably heard of something like objectives and key results, right? How like they grade organizations, like harken back to Andy Grove, right? And all his wisdom. That's who kind of came up with OKRs, and then Google and all the other companies adopted them. If you have been in a company that uses OKRs, like the benefit and maybe sometimes the detriment is like there is a very clear objective if you write them well. It's like, you know, ship this new piece of functionality. And then the key result, you might look at the user activity, like did we get more MAUs or DAOs or WOWs, right? And it's going to have a number assigned with it. At the end of the quarter, right, you're able to say, okay, did this work happen? Like, is the functionality shipped? And like, did we meet our target? And I like that analogy because the thing that it doesn't do is tell the people or the teams responsible for that set of OKRs how to actually get there, how to actually do the work to meet that objective in the way that it's measured, its success measurement. And I think that analogy applies very much to using coding agents. Like we all started and we're very, very verbose in specking out exactly what we wanted it to do. And then that becomes sort of loathsome after a while to be in that much detail, because at the point that you need to be in that detail, you might as well like write the code yourself if you have the capability to. And so you abstract one level higher and you say, okay, how can I get this extraordinarily intelligent, I'm using air quotes on purpose, model and harness to implement like the desire of my intent, and how can I make it keep going and not stopping until it gets to something that I've predefined effectively as the stopping criteria.
Yeah, so
And that's the path forward.
Well, I do think it is maybe a difference between setting OKRs and doing like more involved spec-driven development. But in our defense, we needed to do that with earlier models as well. You'll recall that we needed to do chain of thought prompting before the model sucked up, all of that into reasoning, right?
And the harnesses weren't as advanced either, right? Like
No.
a lot of the gains, I think, haven't just come because, the underlying model LLM is that much smarter. Now, it's because the harness and the model have been sort of co-built and co-optimized, right? And that's why you get, I mean, I'm sure, Han, you could probably go on at length about this. You get very, very different results using coding agents and models depending on the harness and the LLM that's being used, right? Like Claude Code running Opus 4.8 is going to perform much differently than, Pi driving it, for example.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I think it's the all this is just so much smarter now, and all and the way I would put it is instead of a high school intern, now we have a literal PhD student that's so experienced. Once you give it a verifiable objective to achieve, it will actually go out and achieve it. And most of the time, most of the time, it will do it
Yeah.
very well, especially for coding or for some type of design. Like they follow the directions, not the direction, they follow the objectives to the dot. Writing, not so much. There's always a chance of AI slop going on because the way I view this is the model is basically a compression of all the knowledge that it has, right? So when you prompt the model, it's always going to output something similar or something that's close to the node, close to whatever that happens the most. So um, so that's why, like, if you don't control, like what Craig did, right? Like, control your skills to tell you to instruct the model how to write, when you don't inject enough knowledge or instruction into model to steer it to behave in a certain way, uh, that's how we get all the AI slop.
Yeah, and also I do think a lot of the time it does feel like having a really smart like research assistant or early stage grad student, but sometimes they've clearly had a few too many drinks or have like pharmaceutical grade stimulants as well. Like there is a vibe that they've been, playing around with some substances, I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And that's how we know that you have read enough AI slop or
Yeah,
AI
yeah.
conversation. Because that doesn't, like, if you don't read, if you just hand off like type AI, go set do this, and you never read some of the processes, you will never discover some of these
Absolutely. I
kinks.
mean, in most of my rules, it's like if you say something, say it once and do not add any sentences that do not add any value. This type of stuff, right? Because, look, we've got a lovely comment in Discord. Outstanding, everyone, learning so much here. This was awesome. Han and Greg are great educators. And I want to second that. And I've learned a huge amount. Greg, you did mention you're teaching a course. And do you want to tell us a bit of it's a Maven course, right?
It is. Yeah, like just like you, I think maybe you pilled me on this, or maybe it was Hamill or whomever. But it's on a pretty niche topic in the scheme of things. If you look at the like Maven course library, it's on hardcore agentic engineering. So it's basically a lot of the stuff I talked about. It's not for everyone. It's basically like if you want to use agents to build products over a long time horizon, be able to verify that the stuff like that you're actually going to ship from a product perspective will work. I think that driving agents effectively is a very like high skill ceiling task now. And a lot of like what I shared in bits and pieces and a lot of patterns in the book, 25 Patterns in Agentic Engineering, is like the premise of the course. I don't think there's been that many teams that have actually shipped like products fully agentically end to end yet. And like the mindset and the mechanics that you need to do that well is what it's about. So a lot of that actually will come from building something very similar to Dead Reckon in the course because Dead Reckon codifies all the patterns that like heuristically I've been just laboring through. But yeah, that's what it's about. It starts in like 2-3 weeks, like August 3rd. And it should be fun. It's just something else to do, honestly, in addition to building stuff for SpecStory, because I think it's a topic that a lot of people are probably struggling with. Like I gave a lightning lesson 2 days ago on Tuesday, and it was literally on the most basic part of creating a definition of done that will be like the gate that keeps your agent like going. And a lot of the people that were there for that lightning lesson sort of expressed the same feeling that I had in sort of setting that up. It's pretty like dry stuff, like knowing how to do that kind of thing. But when you see the balance of your day moving increasingly towards just spending all your time verifying model outputs,
It's
it
infrastructure.
becomes it
It's
becomes like the most important thing because it's like how can I make my life easier? How can I build the right infrastructure? Because I've done this loop now 1,000 times and like I can't take it anymore. And if this is the way I'm going to be building, I need to know all of these sort of principles and ways to reduce the friction on myself. And yeah, so
I'll also share a link to the lightning lesson. People can watch it after and sign up and see if the course is for them. Is your book public, Greg?
yeah, yeah, it is. It's on the SpecStory website. I'll get a link to that.
Okay. While you're looking for that,
I got
I'd
it.
just love to let everyone know you can get early access, I think, to Han's upcoming book, Evaluation and Alignment, the Seminal Papers, Building Trustworthy AI. So, Han, maybe you can just tell us a bit about your book and then we'll wrap up.
Sure. Yeah. So I had a couple options, a couple topics when we were talking about a potential book deal, right? And there's post training, how to do reinforcement learning. But I figure there's not enough coverage about evaluation and alignment, and 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 that's the skill, right? Not everybody will need to learn how to fine-tune a model, post-training the model, reinforcement learning from human, AI, whatever feedback, right? But everybody nowadays or going towards the future should have should know how to learn, how to evaluate, and potentially align model outputs. And I think that's going to be the core skill, right? How do we call out the agent if the agent is bluffing? And that is the reason why I focus on this book. So we go through all of the seminal papers. Some of them could be older in the aspect of time. They stood the test of time, like how Blue score was designed, how Roge score are designed, and why was those designed that way for what purposes. So it's not really learning about a single metrics, but a design philosophy of those, right? So we go through the whole spectrum into LLM as a judge, and then we go into the alignment phase where why do we do reinforcement learning from human feedback, right? One of the things that people talk about Slop is, all right, I need to be able to determine Slop, which means you have to have a way to show two results and determine which one is which. Then from that, you can have a preference model, a reward model that you can either use as a classifier at the end or a guardrail, or you can use it as a reward model to post-train your models on, right? So there's a lot of this intricate details, and there's also the discussion about alignment, right? Everybody hear about alignment. Nobody knows what that means. And it's a nice word, right? Or what are we aligning for, right? So for Anthropic, they align it for harmlessness, helpfulness, and honesty. So a model should be harmless, helpful, and honest, right? So there's 3H framework, right? So I talk about those as well, go through those very key and core seminal papers that build and leads up to the evaluation to the current ecosystem as a whole.
Super cool. I did want to wrap up now, but far out. One small question, which is prompted, forgive the pun unintended, by everything you both just said. Firstly, Greg has linked to his book and his course in the Discord, so thank you for that, Greg. But my question, when you were talking about agentic engineering, there is such a distribution of expertise and what people are capable of. I still meet data scientists who don't even know like to build an agents.md or to have an agents.md and then maybe have a few other markdowns so you're not cramming that with absolutely everything. With respect to evaluation and alignment, of course, the situation's even worse in terms of the distribution of what different people, different organizations are up to. So I'm wondering first, Greg, I mean, you're talking about hardcore engineering, agentic engineering. I noticed in one of your screen shares, in one of your verification steps, it was like, we need to do a smoke test first. And this is like engineering 101, but agentic engineering 101. One of the first things you want to do is make sure your agents do do smoke tests, and these types of things. So I'm wondering, Greg, what you see as the distribution of where people are at the moment.
Well, like, let me put it a different way. At least instead of talking about a distribution, because it's like hard for me to pontificate on that. Like, I don't know, like the distribution, like in the world, but I think that a lot of people, obviously, if you're a software engineer, for example, you're very comfortable in the traditional SDLC, and right now, um, you probably have access to a coding agent. It's probably in your IDE. Your company probably pays for it. But I think the difference in the mindset is like the unit of work that you're driving these agents towards in agentic engineering is completely different from the way that you probably operate in your sort of team environment, and what you're capable of as an individual is also very, very different. Um, and so I think about it as like, if you want to get really, really good at building products, whether or not they have LLMs embedded in them or not, you have to embrace a completely different mindset about how you actually do the engineering. And that's almost as important as the mechanics of like operating the agents and verifying things, yada yada. And so I think, there's the oft cliched, are you a 10x? There's a 100x, a 1000x engineer, right? I think where we're moving towards is the capability to, of course, drive like what people say is like fleets of agents, right? If you were able to do that, I don't think you need to be able to do that super well to build things completely agentically. You will be bottlenecked on your ability to verify the results, right? Like traditional SDLC with AI assisted augmentation, it's like PRs are the limiting gate, right? Like you can produce so much code, who's going to ever review it all, right? If you're building something like by yourself or on a very small team because you just don't need as many hands on keyboard, you need, the ability to plan and articulate goals and like run the agents in parallel, then you need a better way of brief steering and verifying, right? And so I know I sort of like shirked your initial question, and I was like, I don't know what the distribution is, but I do think like there's probably very few people that are actually fully agentically engineering products that like are going to production and getting users right now. And I think that that's the trend that we're going to move to, because obviously companies keep reducing staff, changing the organizational structures, which is like it's going to take a lot longer to catch up to than the sort of like capabilities of the frontier models. But like no one's really learning how to do this over 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, right? There's not enough time has elapsed. And I think if I had to wager, there is a gigantic distribution in skill sets right now. Like, because you've had to have actually built something in production fully this way to understand like how to do it. And it's not just like, oh, I sit down with like Claude Code and just start like prompting stuff. I mean, it's like the whole engineering process is different. One of the things I kind of mentioned at the beginning is like, I think agentic engineering works best if you work in like a trunk driven way, meaning you're constantly integrating into like, a main branch. Why? Because if you are working with other people and people are working on like long-lived branches, it's harder to keep track of all that context, and your coding agent like doesn't understand, what's out there and what the state of the system is. And so like I know that was like a long sort of meandering like monologue, but one of the things that I really like to do is like constantly integrate in like a dev branch, right, which will be trunk. And then if, a colleague of mine shipping something, just let them ship as long as they are not breaking the build, like let them ship. And then I either do like, use an agent to summarize what it did so I can pick up from the longest sort of tip of like main or the head. And sometimes if they are on a branch, we'll just do some like what I call a semantic rebase. So a rebase, like when you're rebasing commits, right? It's not that. It would be like taking a branch and like re-implementing it if it is like sort of farther away, semantically based on their intent, because agents can do that so much faster. That's not like what a traditional engineering team would do. They wouldn't go re-implement a branch, right, with an agent if a couple days have passed and like, the code base has moved a lot. But that's something that you can do now with agents. And we found like a lot of success working in that way. So yeah, I don't know what the distribution is. I'm sure it's very wide. A lot of people are working in a lot of different ways. There's not a right way, but I have found that, kind of reapproaching the whole development process, not from first principles, but from things that were maybe not as in vogue before, right? Like everyone's known the benefit of CI/CD, and when I say that, I mean like continuous integration and continuous delivery, not like CI/CD build systems for a long time, but it's been hard to implement with humans writing the code in the past. That's why everyone uses pull requests and like, like Git flow or GitHub flow. But now it's like you should be working on a shared trunk, and you should only use, in my mind, like branches for very experimental things. Anyway, I'll stop.
So firstly, I didn't think you shirked my question. I think you changed it slightly into a question that you could specifically speak to. And our jobs are to specify and verify, as we know, even with each other. And I appreciate about you, Greg. You often rephrase my questions into more
I'm
appropriate
trying to
ones.
understand you, Hugo. I don't
If,
know.
if not, yeah,
It's late.
it's the
It's late.
accent.
It's been a long day.
I mean, where this has led me though, I mean, we know you feel like pull requests perhaps shouldn't be used so much now. What about Git generally?
Okay, well, first of all, pull requests all originated from open source land, right? And then every company in the world started adopting them. And, of course, with remote work and distributed teams, it sort of made sense. But if you're working in like a high trust environment and you're actually talking to people, like to your teammates, like having to work that way outside of like obligatory like compliance reasons, which, there are reasons why you might want to have a PR process from like dev to main if you have like multiple like you have a dev environment and like a production environment. I don't think like should have ever been really leveraged as much as they had become. Um, that said, what do I think about Git? It's funny you ask. I think that Git's not going anywhere, and I say that having actually spent a bunch of time trying to build like a real-time version control system over a fair number of months. Um, I think Git's probably here to stay for time immemorial. It does all the things right. Whether or not GitHub um, remains the platform, we'll see. I don't know. I'm not really sure about that. I know that obviously GitHub has had a lot of scaling issues with the volume of code that's getting produced, and underinvestment in probably a lot of the core of it. But I think Git is still a technology that, as long as we're all sort of like operating on file systems, it's like so battle tested and hardened. It's like hard to displace. And it works. And I think the thing that's made it a lot easier now is like you don't need to know all the Git internals in like all the commands. Not that you ever did, because your agents are extremely well versed in all Git mechanics, having been trained on the corpus of data that they've been trained on. So I have not written or done a Git command myself in an extremely long time, and it's been incredible. Like it's been
I
incredible.
I do want to hear your thoughts on GitHub. So when for clarity, when we had Wes McKinney on,
Oh, okay.
he's built his own
Yeah.
tracker and GitHub, and because he
Yeah.
he he became very frustrated with how much you had to read on GitHub. He said that he quote unquote that he thinks they're in league with Big Scroll, which of course is a tongue-in-cheek joke. We know that Mitchell Hashimoto, who created Ghosty, is leaving GitHub for a variety of reasons for his project. So I wonder, do you think the affordance we have on GitHub are from
Okay.
the ancient
So
world?
I don't know all the backstory on Wes, but in Mitchell's case, I know this is more to do with like the like mechanics of working in open source when anyone can open a PR with agent slop, and putting a burden on a maintainer to have to sort of like sift through, is this something I want to spend my time incorporating into the product functionality, right? And so like I know like Mitchell, it's like he's just like he'd been working on some like trust project of some sort, some sort of way of giving someone like rank, for lack of a better term, to know that they're like a trusted contributor or could be one, because I think post like like OpenClaw coming out and now like Hermes agent, all these things, people were just like creating OpenClaw instances running on their, Mac minis or in the cloud or wherever, and just having them go look at repos like autonomously and open Slop pull requests. And there's that famous, can't remember precisely. I think it was like working on some Python library where that like OpenClaw was like fighting with the maintainer.
Yeah. It was a
remember what?
SciPy. Yeah. I do actually.
Yeah.
It was
And so
brutal.
I think like if you're an open source maintainer of an extremely popular project like Ghosty is, and you're a single person and you're trying to figure out like what's worth my time, the affordance on GitHub where anyone can fork your repo and open a PR, unless of course you disable that, without a lot of other controls for like, is this a brand new account? Right? Like, have they contributed and had PRs accepted before? Like, the sort of trust layer around the social coding aspect of GitHub, doesn't exist. So from that perspective, I think, there may be some opportunity there, but there's such a critical mass and set of network effects around GitHub for open source. It's like, I don't know, even if some of these like big names decide to sort of take their business elsewhere, I can't really think I don't see GitHub sort of like, becoming irrelevant. And of course, on the sort of private or business side, obviously it's so embedded into so many different like, companies' entire development processes that it's also like very challenging to understand if it might go the way of the dodo. However, I'll counter myself by saying, there are other version control systems out there that very large companies use, like Perforce, for example. Like Google has like the biggest instance of Perforce ever. All game development studios use Perforce, and they run like modified versions of it, of course. They like Google runs a gigantic mono repo. I think mono repos are extremely effective sort of design patterns for your architecture these days, because I don't know about you, but we have a bunch of different products all in separate repos, and now like you find yourself figuring out like, oh, some of these things are connected and I have to drive an agent session and tell it about context in all these different places, and it's really annoying. So that's the one problem with like distributed version control systems where everything's like a separate repo and you're not using like a mono repo structure. Maybe there's some, I don't know, like white space there, but I just think GitHub's like so embedded. It's like hard to think of it, getting displaced.
Totally.
It's that Lindy rule, right? Like if one thing that existed long enough, it will never die. It will exist for longer, right? So if Kobo is still alive today, I don't see GitHub going away. There might be a more drastic shift once the agent go over certain crazy threshold, more than today. But I don't see people stop using that. And it's a stable, battle-tested way of storing code online.
Without a doubt. And I do wonder how much the Lindy rule holds at times of technological transformation as well, because you can imagine certain things. I'm not saying GitHub is one of those, but
well,
imagine
look,
certain
like
things.
other companies think there's an opportunity. OpenAI
Yeah.
is building some competitor.
Internal one.
Cursor announced Origins, which is effectively
Right.
hosted it in the cloud. Thomas Domke's startup Entire is doing distributed Git repos. Pierre, which also spun off of GitHub, I think has some other like distributed Git sort of hosting service. So there's other services out there. I think the problem is just like the network effects. Like you can build probably a better implementation that is not like a single multi-tenant provider like GitHub is, right? Or you could re-replicate that, but it's just like every other product is integrated with GitHub. Like, you ever use Vercel? You ever use Supabase? You ever use any of these other products that now all your agents are default like recommending to you? Like, it's just like, okay, like I could go use some experimental hosting provider. Like, is it gonna be around in a year? Like, GitHub's owned by Microsoft. Like, it's not gonna go away. Like, unless something,
Yeah.
I don't know, unthinkable happens. Like, I think that's the problem too. It's just like, you know,
Well, it's
it's
good you bring up
better.
on the agent side, right? Like last year, it's extraordinarily hard to steer agents to use UV as a default
Yeah.
for Python, right?
Mm.
And now UV and now nowadays agents are much smarter and they are willing to use UV. So imagine if there is a new alternative that comes up and the training data is really not there, which means you have to spend a whole lot of tokens in your skills or whatever to steer the agent to use that new repository structure. And
Yeah.
that's going to be adoption heavily.
I didn't mention this, but I think the biggest source of GitHub lock-in is probably Actions. Like
Yeah.
Actions is just there's not really a competitor for it like there used to be, but now it's kind of like I don't know. Like I'm not a big GitLab user for like obvious reasons, and I know that they have like a whole CI/CD pipeline and whatnot. But like, I mean, I couldn't imagine building anything with like out Actions these days. Like it would be so annoying. So it's like, are you really gonna rebuild all of the hosted runner infrastructure that's all part of Azure uh, alongside of your hosted version control system, right? Because like you're not using a hosted version control system just to store your code if you're building something for real. You're also using it to deploy all your artifacts and manage your
But
releases.
let me ask you, like, I think the contrarian take, and you know a lot more about this, having been at GitHub. If OpenAI is building its GitHub competitor and they have scheduled tasks and triggers and hooks, couldn't they reproduce actions pretty easily?
I mean, they do have a lot of compute. It's a different type of compute, of course. I'm not really so sure. My sort of skeptical opinion is that OpenAI is going down that route because they want you to host your code and give them some permission to train on it. Like
No,
I don't know if that's
that's what I'd
fact, but
do.
that's what I mean, that's what GitHub, that's what happened. I mean, like Microsoft bought GitHub, then formed a partnership with OpenAI, and OpenAI built the very first version of the Codex model before all of these other things adopted that name that was integrated in GitHub Copilot based on the
Yo,
repository source
okay,
code
let's
in GitHub.
let's get this right. So Han mentioned something very important earlier, RLVR, reinforcement learning with verifiable rewards or verifiable results. And what do you need to see if the code your agent wrote is something the human found acceptable? If they git commit it or commit it to a repo, that's the strongest signal. That's the reinforcement learning, right? That's the strongest signal that they found it acceptable. So if as OpenAI
Historically,
or
historically, yes, because people were manually committing things. Now I'm not so sure, but yes,
but
you're
if
right.
if you are yeah, if you
Historically.
ask your agent to, that's one of the at the end of a long trace and all of this stuff. I just caught myself cussing because the YouTube algorithm doesn't particularly like it. But um, if someone commits, then that's a strong signal that this is something, or gets their agent to commit. So if you have that in, because a lot of people turn off training, what that actually meant, like, bleh, I don't know. But that for them to do RLVR, having that in house is something which presumably could help them a huge amount in GPT 6.3 or whatever.
I mean, there are stories where there are companies, there are startups or big data companies, right? Now they are putting out bounties and like they want to acquire that startup and get their code bases and their email chains and take that code base to create or use as a training corpus and farm or mine those code bases for good training corpuses. So it's definitely I think the incentives are aligned for some of the companies there to do so they can get more training corpuses. Because at the end of the
Yeah.
day, the limit between GPT 5.6 now, I think, is like
Yep.
so Terra, whatever. And the
Mm.
next iteration of like let's say GPT-7 is the amount of training corpuses
Yep.
that's high in signal, difficult, difficult to complete, long horizon. So hey, it could be that they could just train a model or have an agent run not just one single pull request, but hey, this is an empty code base. Here at the end, this is what I want. I don't care how many commits you have. Just do the whole thing from end to end.
Oh,
And
and
you can have a like 20-hour or 20-day task running on GPUs.
This is one of the reasons Cursor, and I put this in quotes, but is worth $60 billion to Elon Musk. I think it's also spite. Like I think he will spend a lot of money to, out of spite, like try to ruin
Yeah.
OpenAI. Kind of like, I don't know if you've seen Curb Your Enthusiasm, but Larry at one point opens a spite shop, a coffee shop, to put the coffee shop guy and out of business. Um, but you know, Cursor being worth this amount is like I presume the move is having all of the training data from them on what.
Cursor is really, really like I think there's a couple companies that have really, really good data flywheel, right? So like in data science, we talk about data flywheel, where the output, the result, it can be mined and go back to improve the models, right? We see that on YouTube algorithms or Amazon search algorithms and what recommendations and whatnot. And Midjourney is has really, really good data flywheel from their user base on Discord. And Cursor, they collected so much data. And of course, there's Claude Code, but there's also Claude Code and now OpenAI with Codex collecting a lot of data, right? And now it's if you are to simulate a human as an agent, right? As I'm an agent and I want to do my work, then what environment do I have? First, I have to have some IDE or a terminal nowadays, and I have to have a GitHub terminal, a GitHub account to store my code, and then some CI/CD to pipe it out, to run the code somewhere like a web app or whatnot. So they are, I think it makes sense for different frontier lab companies or different data lab companies to collect each one of the pieces to construct a more well-rounded environment. Basically, they're just basically they are just playing what's that? Minecraft, collecting different pieces.
Yeah.
So then they can train an agent to chop down the trees and build a castle or whatnot.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, look, we've gone over time, but wonderfully so. I've learned so much from you both, and it's always great to chat. Thanks everyone for joining. We've had over 60 people join throughout. Thank you for those sticking around to the end as well. Check out Greg's course, check out SpecStory, check out Han's website and his book as well. And it's Han Not Solo is my understanding. But to wrap up, I just want to thank you both for your time and wisdom and coming and sharing everything you're doing with agents with us all.
Yeah. Thanks for
Thank you
having
so
us.
much for having me.
Yeah, fantastic. And thank you all for joining once again. If you like this stuff, share it with a friend, like and subscribe, and check out other stuff we're up to in the description. And in the famous words of Dr. Dre, see you in the next episode.
Bye.
And